start again. I apologize.
All right, Hotep, Habari Gani, welcome to the Molefi Asante Institute in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the United States of America. We have here at 5535 Germantown Avenue always a gathering of people who are interested in African culture and African American history and values. So we are very, very happy today for those who have braved the holiday to come out. This is one of those big holidays in America. They call it Mother's Day. And so a lot of people have decided that correctly in their own estimation to, of course, just celebrate their mothers all day. We're going to celebrate the mothers too, but we have a wonderful program for you today. I am very honored and very pleased as the president of the Molefi Asante Institute to welcome those of you who do not know to Dr. Na Dove. Dr. Dove is actually one of the leading proponents of African motherhood. Her book, African Mothers, which was written several years ago, is perhaps one of the first books that was written about African mothers based on the study, the research that she did in Africa. In addition to that, she has also published the book, Afrocentric School, the Afrocentric School, and also in connection with me, the book, Being Human Being, Transforming the Race Discourse. In addition to that, Dr. Na Dove has influenced a number of thinkers, leaders in the field on the question of African Womanism, not to be misunderstood as Africana Womanism, which is another theory, which is also significant. But African Womanism is Dr. Dove's theory, and she has trained a lot of students in this theory. A lot of her PhD students, of course, following in her footsteps. She has a PhD from the State University of New York in Buffalo. She was born in West Africa. She has a strong, or raised in West Africa. She has a very strong commitment to African culture and African values. So I'm just happy to be here on this program with her and to have sort of an interrogation about motherhood itself. We just have this program, we decided that since our speakers were not able, who were on the schedule, not able to be here, that we would just continue to have a program that would deal with the question of motherhood. So welcome and thank you. Thank our audience who is on live streaming. Dr. Dove, no one that I know of has delved into African mothers more than you. Few people have ever attempted to deal with the question of the African concept of motherhood. I would like to have a conversation with you today about your ideas, especially how they fit into what is called African Womanism. Since the 1990s, you have been talking about African Womanism, and I want you to sort of explain to us how you would look at African Womanism, and just tell us something about that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asante. I was going to say some things about you. Can I do that?
You are the African mother here, so you can definitely say anything you want to about me.
Okay, well...
so long as it's good.
Yes, I realize I'm in your institute, so I must make sure of that. I just want to say that we know you as the most prolific African writer since Kemet. You've published over 104 books, and you should be hailed as a brilliant writer for all people. But we're in the black sections and African sections where your work becomes invisibilized, even though it applies to all humans who will benefit from reading them. You've created Afrocentric theory, which is very critical to African people because it places us in the center of our own cultural history, which has been distorted, denied, invisibilized in this structure that we're living in under white supremacy. And so it's very valuable to use this theory to understand who we are so that we can understand who we can become. It is the foundation and basis of Africology, which is the discipline that has developed out of it, and I like to proudly say that I am an Africologist. Africology itself as a discipline is not racist, unlike all the other Eurocentric, Middle Eastern, Asian or disciplines. They are all culturally oriented to believe in the inferiority of the blackest skinned people. Africology looks at humanity from an African perspective. Dr. Asante has been developing Afrocentric theory for 40 years, and it's international, which means that it has escaped from the pen or prison of the Pan-European Academy, which is a victory. And you were asking me about
African Womanism, yes, and how that relates to your own theories of Afrocentricity.
Well, actually, it is grounded in Afrocentric theory. And I just want to read this because I can write better than I can speak. So I found the abstract of explaining African Womanism as Afrocentric theory, and I say because it is based on research with women mothers who wanted to send their children to Afrocentric or African-centered schools because they believed that they should know who they are. So they were very special mothers, and it really showed me the significance of motherhood and mothering, the power of the woman, the power of the mother, more than any other work that I'd done up until that time. So I would not call myself a feminist or somebody that was particularly looking at the role of African women, aside from myself being one and being a mother and trying to raise my children in a school system that was denying the humanity of black people, of African people, of the continent. And so my abstract is European domination and fear of white supremacy are two of the most compelling reasons African women send their children to culturally affirming schools. African women are examining re-Africanization as a way to challenge social structures and inappropriate value systems. The African womanist theory is centered in the development of the African worldview. Racist ideology is associated with European patriarchy, and I kind of contextualize what it is with that beginning.
How does it differ from feminism?
Well, feminism has risen out of patriarchy and the debasement of the woman in patriarchy, and it is racialized because the women who have given it its name look to their ancient traditions of Greek philosophy and ideas, and they begin their analysis of feminism or their theory of feminism from that point of history. And they, in this country and most countries, have been unable to understand the racialization of humanity and their role in racializing it. Essentially, the construction of race and the hierarchy of human beings based on the melanin content of the skin has actually guided the philosophies and the behaviors of people who believe in that. And feminism has arisen out of that way of looking at the world. And so often the women don't understand their role in conquest and seeing themselves as superior in the racial hierarchy. African womanism does not do that. It sees itself as part of the women of the whole world, African women in particular, who were the first women to populate the world, and Africa, the birthplace of men and women that developed a culture that was balanced, and out of that culture, respect for their equality, for their powers. The African womanism arose out of that recognition that the first women, the first ancient women, were balanced and in harmony with the men, and out of that my art was created. So it is not hierarchical in the sense either of male and female hierarchy, and it's not racist because racism is a fairly new cultural construct.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So very good, very good. So now would you also explain the question of how African womanism differs from Africana womanism? Because we know in the United States, we've heard the term Africana womanism as well as feminism. So, and then now, of course, your theory is African womanism, and you've explained that pretty good. But what would there be any overlaps or differences between Africana womanism and African womanism?
Well, I think Africana womanism is a wonderful form of womanism because it really looks very deeply at the history of the America, the US in particular, the enslavement, and it sort of begins its history very much grounded in enslavement, although it recognizes some women's values, and so it is very important, and it also looks at some women in Africa, but it takes the colonial perspective, and so it's very useful for inside America, and I've really tried to develop something that goes back historically to the beginning, and the reason that I've tried to do that is show that there are African models that exist prior to enslavement, prior to colonization, and if we're going to develop models that are African, we need to go to Africa to find those models that are appropriate for African people. So that is a major difference.
Thank you very much. Now you're a mother, you're a grandmother, you're a great grandmother, and I was wondering whether or not these roles differ in your mind. What's the difference between these roles?
Well, they really depend upon the circumstances within which the mothers, grandmothers, and great-grandmothers are living. So if they are engaged in circumstances of war, then whoever is able to raise the children and take care of them will do that. So a great-grandmother can be looking after her great-grandchildren because the mother, something's happened to the mother. So there's no sort of rigid way of saying that one does something because it changes. And certainly in the history here, during the enslavement history, women have been called upon to be mothers when they actually have not given birth. But that's part of African matriarchy or African womanism, that those people who have compassion and love and care are considered mothers. This is a high status. So these statuses of mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother will change according to whatever is necessary at the time. I would say that a great-grandmother is older than the first mother, and so there are lessons that the older mothers can transmit to the younger mothers that can be very helpful to them. So I think it's about age and respect and responsibility. They might be the major differences.
All right. Thank you. My mother-in-law, who passed away at 100 years of age, once said that you cannot be a mother just to your own children. If you are a mother, you have to mother all children. Do you agree with that African adage?
100%. If you're asking me or the audience, but I certainly do, and that's what I mentioned, in terms of people who show compassion and love and care.
Mm-hmm. What historical examples exist to help guide mothers of this generation? Are there any ideas that you have in terms of who would sort of give some frame of reference to where we are now?
Well, the thing is that we're living in a racist patriarchy, and so the debasement of the African woman within the race paradigm, the darkest skinned women are the most disrespected. And so in the society as a whole, the mother is not considered to be anything that's very special. And the darker she is, the less special she becomes. And at one time during enslavement, of course, the mother was could make profit by having children that would be enslaved. So she did have a worth then, but it was nothing to do with her value as a human being. It was rather to do with her value as a commodity. But people could not have survived in this country without the African mother. So it's impossible. So I think that knowledge about the role of the mother that challenges the depiction of the African mother needs to be highlighted and developed to show the truth of who this person actually is. So I think it might be an educational thing, because some of our children can grow up not understanding this truth, even though they have lovely mothers, but may not understand through the racialized prism of who mothers are, may not respect her enough.
So we have a high rate of single mothers raising children. How can they be supported by the community, and what would their children need? How do we do that?
Well, we have to recognize how the family is a target of oppression, And the welfare system is a way of promoting single parenthood, not only mothers as parents, single parenthood, right. Controlling it through funds that are not enough for single mothers to be able to raise their children. My book on African mothers really looked at single mothers as examples of powerful women who engage different members of families to support them, even though they may have been on welfare. And often it's required that you prove that you're single, even if you might be with somebody and not married to that person. That person, as a provider helping you, has to actually get away from you and hide. So there are the providers, men and women, who cannot be known to be helping single parent mothers, certainly at the time that I was doing research. So they had to be invisible, but they still helped. So I would say it's a community, it's community business. And if we can stay outside the debasement of the woman who is on welfare, the African mother on welfare, if we can use African ways to be supportive, and again it's about education, and there's still some of the cultural beliefs and values that are still retained, but if we can do that and highlight its significance, then the community can help, because the status of single parent is a ridiculous status in the first place.
Thank you. We had a historic event last week at Temple University in the Department of Africology. We graduated 9 PhDs, and never before in the history of Temple has any one department graduated 9 doctoral students at one time. We don't know whether it has ever happened anywhere in this country, but we had 9 PhD students getting their degrees from an Afrocentric department and an Afrocentric faculty. Now, one of those students, Courtney Carr, was your student.
Yes.
And she completed her PhD dealing with the propaganda around genital cutting in Tanzania. And how did your theory help her organize her work? African matriarchy, is that the same as Western matriarchy? How, just sort of explain that whole relationship. I may have it wrong, so certainly I just want you to speak to that, and particularly the whole question of African matriarchy.
Well, it's African Womanism. Comes out of Jopian two-cradle theory, which argues, where Sheikh Anta Diop argues that successfully and theorizes that there are 2 major cultural orientations, and they come from different cradles of civilization. All people were born, humanity was born from the southern cradle, and Africa, and then African people left about 70,000 years ago to populate the world. So all our indigenous people are all actually culturally African, even if their phenotypes have changed. This is not relevant. These phenotypes, which is changes and differences in bodies, colours of skin, hair texture and features and so on, these have been considered to be race races rather than phenotypes of one African model. And so the second cradle was created by African people who became dislocated from their African origins and saw themselves as a completely different set of people. They no longer were connected to their ancestors and their history, and they survived very difficult climates and conditions. So during that time, women had less value because as potential mothers, they needed to be cared for more than the independent African mother. And so that second cradle that evolved thousands of years after the first cradle was called the Northern Cradle, and the women and was essentially dominated by the man. And you could say, I have definitely said that this is the first hierarchy, and from this hierarchy came values and beliefs that were unable to see the respect and understand the respect and values of both men and women, and the woman as the potential mother became devalued. Now, when Job is discussing these cradles, he sees these differences as just the woman and the man as equals, as trying to seek harmony with each other, and then the second cradle as patriarchy, the domination of the man, of the woman. But in the first matriarchy, he calls it, but actually people have a problem with matriarchy because it is actually, it's a European word that means the same as patriarchy, only the other way round. So using African matriarchy signifies that it is a different balance between women and men, where they have created a culture that respects people, from which the first ethical set of standards, ma'at, arose. So in reality, you can't actually have ma'at without a culture that respects both women and men. And so even though it's in modern religions, the commandments and various ways that you should behave, we have a perfect example here in this country where people say they're not going to do stuff, say they're not going to murder other people, but do it anyway. This is not ma'at, because people are not guided to even understand these ethical terms. And the culture itself defines people's behavior. So if you live in a culture that says, I will not harm people and harm nature and kill people, and you do that, you have a severe problem of cognitive dissonance, I would say, cognitive cultural dissonance. Did that answer the question?
I think so. I mean, I really do. Now, I have another question, though. That is, what political system is best for mothers? Would it be capitalism, Marxism? I mean, what do you think mothers would be? How are mothers best served?
Well, they're certainly not best served in capitalism or Marxism, because for Marx, who has really shown us very much how European culture has developed capitalism, and he certainly had compassion for the workers and the poor people in Europe where he made his studies, and he was also able to look at Africans and do the research to show that Africans were considered to be black gold during enslavement, and that they produce the profit which was fundamental to the development of capitalism proper. So when you look at capitalism, you will find that the values and beliefs of capitalists are linked to Northern Cradle values and beliefs, which promote aggression, lies, hypocrisy, and the debasement of black people. So when you are choosing a theory that will embrace mothers, African mothers, dark-skinned mothers, you would not be able to use Marxism or capitalism as the best way to promote the love of black women as mothers, because it's the same system. It always capitalizes on the people of the world, the black people of the world. So in class, the people at the bottom of the class structure are the darkest skinned people, as they are in every one of the hierarchies. And so that capitalism maintains that, because, you know, even with the work that mothers do, it's invisibilized, it's not important, but they produce the people. And also, you know, we know very clearly that black-skinned women receive less wages than light-skinned women or white women or yellow women. So, you know, all these inconsistencies and hierarchies can be attributed to capitalism, which Karl Marx, as great as he was, he saw that capitalism as the highest state of human development or economic development, and from the vantage of people who are impoverished by it and exploited by it, that cannot be the truth. And particularly for African people, the whole of Africa is taken and conquered by Europeans and Arabic people, and all these countries have exploited and created profit on the backs of black people. So I don't see how you could take something that is corrupt and evil and make it something good. Theoretically, I don't see that.
Well, the final question that I have for you, Dr. Dove, is what, I don't know whether I should say what is a mother or who is a mother? Who is a mother? And how would you see a mother?
Well, again, I would have to go back to people who have compassion and love. There are people who give birth to children. That is what we look at as the standard for what a mother is. A mother is the person, the first teacher, the person who will raise these children and prepare them for the world. And so she is absolutely critical to the child's development. But when we're in circumstances where the mother is debased, it's very hard for her to be the best that she can be. Or he can be, because anyone who's showing these love of humanity, love of children, will be maybe in a situation and responsible for raising those children. And you know, as long as that love is there, that I would say that's who a mother is. But she is also the person that is culturally oriented to produce the children that fit into the culture, either that she's in or the one that she prefers to be in, which is the condition right now of African people, because we're not in our cultural orientation, we're in somebody else's, and we're being shaped to behave and believe in the conqueror's version of who we're supposed to be. So the ultimate version is the woman of Ma'at, the woman who can show her children how to be the best people that they can be, and is the first educator and would have knowledge of her own culture to be the ultimate mother.
Okay, well, there you have it. We have wonderful, wonderful answers to the interrogation. We have, I know, some questions from outside of this audience, but if there's anyone in the audience, you have a question, you can certainly ask Dr. Dove. But, if you don't have a question, I can understand that as well. She gave a very thorough answer, and I ran out of questions.
Thank you. Well, I at least need you to know that I'm definitely not a perfect mother. So please don't use me as an example.
I guess I'm not a perfect father either. So, but at any rate, one of the things that we do have, we have questions from some perfect people outside who are going to ask questions.
First question came from a user named Son from Brooklyn. He says, how can an African understanding of manhood and womanhood be used to stop the war of the sexes between our people in the West?
Yes, that's such a great question. And I'm very blessed to be in the Department of Africology, where there are men and women who are theoretically doing research that is looking for the Ma'atic man and the Ma'atic woman, seeing them as people who should be working with each other. And that's based on the origins of humanity, because we know that by the development of Ma'at, this is what people tried to do. So I really praise people who are seeking this African cultural orientation to understand themselves and to seek improving themselves, and not following European manhood or African man or Arabic manhood or Hindu manhood or any of the manhoods that believe in the superiority of women, and in particular black women, the darkest skinned women. So we have to go beyond, we have to go to the ancient times to find the models. And there's plenty of research that's available through all the people like Dr. Asante, people like Sheikh Anta Diop, people like Ivan van Sertima's works, all the people associated with him. I could go on. You know who they are. These are the people you get your knowledge from, and you stay within the cultural orientation which you will get with Afrocentric theory. It's not just about being black, about being African.
Well, yeah, one of the questions that I have, and then we have other questions as well, but one of the questions I have on the basis of the Brooklyn question has to do with the assumption of the Brooklyn question. And I may have this wrong, but given the question about the war between the sexes, is there truly this war going on, or is it overestimated, or is it underestimated, or is this war that this person assumes a problem of the society itself? Yes. I mean, I wonder about a question like that, and I just wonder. Yeah.
I need to answer that, because when we're looking at culture, we are living in a culture that disrespects African humanity, the phenotypes of African people. And it is patriarchal, and we know it's patriarchal because patriarchy and aggression and racism all merged together as one. The indigenous people suffered genocide and murder. those are the first people, the African people who were brought here, have suffered enslavement and cruelty. And the thing is that the patriarchal belief of Europe is infecting our minds. We go to school to learn that men are superior to women. It's a real thing that's happening, and there are black men killing black women. I mean, this is a reality that we often try to smooth over and act as if we're so African that we don't do this, but we do this, and it is a real thing, and that has to be seen to be culturally imposed, because we have an African origin that is opposite to this. So we have to go back to the old model to create the new one, and part of it is to do with education and knowledge. And if we use the patriarchal model, the patriarchal racist model, to define who we are, use the lens of Europe to look at ourselves, then we just do what they do, but we're black.
All right, so now I'm going to go to the audience, and then I'll come back to the live stream where we have another question.
Hotep.
Hotep.
It's not about racism, but it is about ethnic heritage, cultural imperative. And the mother looms incredibly larger than who she is. She's an archetype in our subconscious mind. The question I have is, how can we get the true knowledge of the transformative power and energy of the mother into the minds of our people?
Well, my answer is that this is an educational process, and currently anything that speaks of the truth, like Afrocentric theory, is debased in the Pan-European Academy, and not only theoretically, but in terms of debasing the people who actually teach these ideas. So it's a difficult area, but in Afrocentric theory is actually spreading, and in Africa, because it still has the foundational sort of knowledge of the influence of the mother and her reverence, the reverence for the mother, although it has to be hidden if people are Christians or Islamic and so on. That sort of has to be hidden because she's worthless, but the thing is that these are the pillars of culture that still exist. And so I see Africa and other indigenous people in the world who've managed to stay as far away from conquest as possible, they do exist, as being those who will create the environment and the proper respect for the mother. But we can go back to Kemet again, and we can look at all the evidence to show that the mother was so respected that she was used as the protector of Kemet in all the different as a serpent, as a viper, as a snake, as and who represent female power and our mothers in the pantheon, in the ideas from Kemet, but also the way of balance there. We can still identify that. So in the spiritual system, the mother was divine. So it's already existed, you know. So we're at a low ebb. We're saying that we're more civilized than we've ever been, which is ridiculous because we kill more people than we ever killed every day. And, you know, we destroy nature, we destroy the animals, we destroy the skies. One could go on, but these things are somehow considered to be about advance. But when we look at the truth of the history of humanity, we find that advances and achievements were were created thousands of years before now, and we've got to be able to see that the theory of evolution that we're all taught is actually a lie. We can go back, say, and I was talking to Dr. Asante today, we can go back to the Libombo bone, for instance, which is supposed to be, it has been said, that it carves out the movements of the moon. So it's scientific, but obviously the movements of the moon you could not understand unless you understood the movements of the sun and the planets. So it's a high level of science on this one baboon bone, which is 40 to 45,000 years old. And it is said that it is for women to know their menses when they have their periods. And so even then, why could not a woman have been the one that created these understanding? And so our heads are very patriarchal. The idea of evolution, we're thinking we were monkeys and we came to today, and the most evolved person is the white man. And it's because the white man wrote the theory of evolution. And we have to try to escape from that by looking at things in an Afrocentric way that respects these ancient tools that came before. And it's cleverly done so that each period or epoch is made into a time when people were less civilized. So you've got the Stone Age, you've got the Iron Age, you've got the, you know, all these different ages. But during Iron Ages and Stone Ages, you know, if you look at Van Sertima's work, there were people making steel. How do you account for that in the evolution theory? There are all kinds of things like that. For instance, people who have made those beautiful statues in Kemet, the smooth stone statues, which are very much like the statues in Zimbabwe, people are still been searching in Kemet for what are the tools that made this? How did people do this, you know? But as a matter of fact, recently people have found that the flint stones from the time of the Stone Age are actually able to cut these rocks. So we have to have a new headspace about who we actually are, and it doesn't begin at Kemet, but Kemet is the place where we can find the most evidence of who we have been. But it couldn't exist without all the people that created the sciences that they built on, any more than this couldn't exist without the sciences that came out of Africa in the first place.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think one of the comments that was made by Tamara 100, which is so incredible, she says, "This was life-giving for me today." That's what she said. Isn't that wonderful?
That's such
a
wonderful comment. Honor.
We had some other people who were interested in trying to figure out how to save the HBCUs, but that question was not on the subject today. But thank you so much, Dr. Dove.
Thank you
so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank all of you for coming. And we want to also thank Brother Kareem
Thank
Board.
you,
We have to
Brother
always
Kareem.
thank Brother Kareem Board for being here. He's a giant. He's a giant among all, and we appreciate him so much. And thank all of you for coming. I know this is an important day for many people in this country and for you yourselves. So we say go in peace and go in blessing and go in victory. Asante sana. Thank you very much for coming.